Okay, this story is called How I Learned to Hate My Own Gender. I made this throwaway account just for this, and I will be changing names just in case. This story includes beatings, rape, stabbings, etc., so just a warning. Anyway, let me start this off by saying I guess I have always been kind of weird. I also did not have an easy childhood. My mom basically lived in the hospital and would regularly die to be brought back by defibrillators. And as I am mixed race, half white, I would have to stay home with my Native American father. Uh-oh. I know where this is going. Which, this entire half of my family is predisposed to addiction genetically. Yeah, that's what I figured. My dad, being an extreme alcoholic who also happened to hate me for not being my brother and being a girl. This led to a long road of abuse and a hatred for women that still burns inside me to this day. I have and will always have an incel mindset and I guess what you would call a tomboy. Some whores will say I have internalized misogyny, but I can't help but feel that they're all genuinely less deserving than men. To kind of give a setup to why I dealt with what this story is going to end up being about, I'll tell you about my abuse with my father. At age 9, I made the connection that alcohol equals mean dad. I poured out his liquor and therefore he broke my nose. At age 6, god damn. My mom would have never let this happen, but she'd always be dying in the hospital, which has given me extreme levels anxiety to the point I have agoraphobia now in my adult life, along with bipolar disorder, etc. Seeing things like my mom having a seizure and breaking her head open and all the blood was very hard on me, and I had to grow up really fast. Especially because my dad would beat me for showing emotion, like if a dog died. He'd even yell at my mother that he better not cry in front of us kids. Anyway, I sort of trailed off. After she had been there for months, my dad started doing things like installing a deadbolt lock on the outside of my bedroom door, locking me in my room with no food or water or anything for stimuli for days. I would get so out of it from lack of stimuli that I'd scratch at the wooden door till my nails peeled and I still have the scars. Meanwhile, he'd take my little brother fishing. My mom ended up living, thank God. I told her dad beat me and I didn't want them together anymore because he also beat my mom when she was completely out of it and gone mentally from the fact she had almost died. She left him immediately. I didn't tell her the worst parts of the abuse until later in life when a therapist told my mother that nobody cuts themselves as bad as I do and wasn't raped by a close male relative, and they were gonna lock me away in a loony bin until I admitted my father raped me, which did not happen. I was, however, raped at 15. I got in an argument with my boyfriend at the time and went for a walk at the park, stabbed 12 times. Don't go to that park, kids. Somehow lived, riddled with scars. This boyfriend was the beginning of my incel-filled love life. I loved bitter virgins on 4chan. That's a mistake. I liked edgy anime-obsessed virgins. I related to them. I met him on 4chan, and he happened to move to my town and to my school, and we were dating 11 days later. But what I hadn't anticipated would be him trying to beat the fuck out of me. I was 14 and 2 separate times he tried to beat me up. I fought back the first time, but the second time I completely wrecked his shit and he never touched me again. There you go. There you go. I believe it or not, I bet any given 4chan incel can probably get the shit kicked out of them by a 14-year-old girl. At 14, I had an extreme brain injury that made it so I had to relearn how to talk for about 6 months. It was like I knew what words I wanted to say, but when I'd go to speak, nothing would come out. I am still self-conscious, so I am sorry if any of this is hard to follow. I still struggle at times. The biggest issue I deal with now is I have a seizure disorder from the said brain injury. This will come into play later on. I don't have any friends, so if I had a boyfriend, they would be my only friend. I'd do things like not leave my bed for months, not really eat for weeks, etc. I became very sickly because of depression over a 2-year long-distance relationship with some other incel that he managed to find an IRL girl to be with, and he left me in the dust. I became around 78 pounds, and I am a 5'10" woman. I couldn't stand anymore from the weight loss, or I'd faint. I ended up gaining back enough to do things, but I am and most likely always will be underweight. I find another incel. This one is my brother's friend. I lose my virginity at 20 years old to him. I thought she said she was raped at 15, but maybe there was a miscommunication. I don't know. I lose my virginity at 20 years old to him, and long story short, he dumped me and then attempted to kill us both in a car accident, and my dating life still managed to go downhill after he tried killing us both in a car crash. Life just got worse and worse for me. I became an alcoholic, and my family abandoned me with an elderly man that is a pedophile with schizophrenia. It got worse and worse living there while I worked at GameStop. He'd start yelling while he held his gun and say the government sent underage sex agents with fake IDs to try and fuck him, and that the government was trying to frame him for 2 counts of statutory rape. He said the neighborhood kids would come into the attic and record him for the government, and that they would drill holes into the ceiling at night to watch me sleep. Yet, if I ever woke up late at night, I'd just see him, cleaning his gun, watching me sleep. He kept trying to touch me. He'd offer back rubs or weird shit that I'd decline. There are 2 store chain where I live walking distance from each other. One in a mall, one in a strip mall style thing. I worked at the mall. But one day they had to fire some guy because he completely alphabetically ruined all the drawers full of stuff we sell, so the mall store asked for some competent workers to cover some shifts over at the other store. Me and another boy were sent over to fix the mess that this kid made. And this is where it happens. I meet a boy who works for the other store and work with him that day. He looks exactly like the Virgin in the Chad versus Virgin meme. I cannot resist. Oh, you should have resisted. If he looks like the Virgin from the meme, you should be able to resist, I think. He offers me a ride home after my ride doesn't come through, and I end up meeting his father and his dog too. I'll call him Carson. Carson offers his phone number for if I need a ride home ever again, and said we should play video games together sometime and I should add him on Steam. I end up going to Carson's house to hang out because he said he wanted to cook for me. I start coming over almost every day. The 3rd day, New Year's Eve. He kisses me, I am extremely drunk, and he asks me to be his GF and we have sex. He says he was a virgin as we start. Cool. I still haven't had much sex either. And he comes in me without asking, saying, I assumed you were on birth control. That's a bad assumption to make, boys. Don't fall for that one. The next day for his lunch break, he buys me Plan B and walks to my work and walks me around the mall holding my hand and a Walgreens bag with Plan B in it. I thought that was romantic, LOL. She wrote LOL, not me, but I probably would have said it too. I end up telling him about my living situation with scary old man that watches me sleep. He asks me to move in with him, his sister, and dad. I have never lived with a significant other, ever, but I was excited even if we just shared the basement and would sit with 2 monitors next to each other in the cave area of our room playing games together. Carson started showing extreme red flags. Like his dad would ask him to do something and he'd freak out and tell his dad to kill himself. I find out he is half Thai and his mother is in Thailand and not with the family because she has extreme bipolar disorder and tried to stab the whole family to death. Carson's dad says Carson has the same thing but that he could never be violent. Things are great for a while and I am elated. I am so in love. He says he's gonna marry me. I imagine what our kids would look like. He starts doing weird things, like if he eats, he hides the dishes in our room until all the dishes are gone, and his father would command me to find the hidden dishes. Then it started getting worse. For him to go to work, I'd have to wake up 2 hours earlier than he'd go to work, pick out his outfit, get his keys to open the store, and put those clothes in the dryer so they'd be warm when I dressed him. I had to physically dress him when he wouldn't wake up. Folks, don't date an incel. I don't know if this needs to be said. And it's cold where we live, so that's why I put him in the dryer for a few minutes. It got to the point he'd spit on me for trying to wake him up and call me a cunt. He started taking all my money and made me cry every day, and called me crazy because I cried every day because he'd say how he doesn't love me. He proposes. Soon after, the big night happens. I have a seizure. When this happens, I get scared, and when I lived with my mom, would hug my mom and cry, but with, she did not call him Carson here, so I'm just going to say Carson, but I think she might have said the real name by accident. But with Carson, I'd hug him and cry because I'd never understand what was going on. It took time after waking. He blamed me for the seizure. I tried to hug him. He shoved me down a flight of stairs. He started packing my stuff, and I began to disassociate. I felt like I wasn't real, and I was watching all this happen to someone else. He gets mad I'm not helping pack, says this is all you're good for, and starts to beat and rape me, even forcing inanimate objects into me. I had contusions and I was internally bleeding, and he also had scraped a lot of my skin off and hit me to the point I lost a lot of blood both internally and externally. He blocked me the first time I tried to run, saying if I left, he'd tell the police that I was suicidal, and they'd believe him because of all my bad cutting scars. I managed to get out the second time I ran for the door. The police picked me up, saying Carson is so worried about me, but that there is a warrant out for my arrest. My bail is set to $1,000. Meanwhile, a guy there, for beating his GF for the 12th time, got $200 bail. What was I in for? Failure to appear in court years before for a case that was already closed that was a self-defense case. I got a misdemeanor for domestic violence for hitting back after being beat for 3 hours. But the case was closed and it was wiped from my record. Except a mistake was made. I failed to appear in court for a hearing that never happened. They messed up and had me falsely imprisoned for 4 days and said they'd promised to actually wipe my record clean this time. Carson called my mom to come get all my stuff. He threw it on the lawn. I stay on a friend's couch for a while. I become a heroin addict for a while. I leave the state to stay with a friend 14 hours away and become clean of everything, go back to college, etc. The heroin problem comes back though. I still miss Carson. Even after all he had done, we never even actually broke up. He just blocked me on everything, which he did all the time when mad anyway, but this time when he saw me in person at work, he slammed and broke things, then went outside and paced outside. I knew that meant we were over. It took me a very long time to get over him. I thought he was the love of my life. I have left out many other incel-type guys who I end up dating, and they end up hurting me. We are on to my current relationship. We meet online. He drives here. He's never even kissed a girl. He said he wanted to just be friends because he had none, but that when he saw me in person, he thought I was beautiful and yada yada. We start dating. He's never had a girlfriend. We both fall very hard in love. But this time, nothing bad has happened. The worst thing that happened is I told him about my heroin problem, and instead of leaving, he paid for my treatment to get me better. He's never yelled at me, we've never fought, and it's been a year now. I am back into my hobbies, unlike when I was with these incels who wouldn't let me do stuff. I grew up to be a competitive figure skater, and am now in a roller derby. This man supports me through thick and thin. But I am scared that I love him so much that even though he's never even raised his voice at me, and we've never fought, that if he did manage to beat me, I think I'd stay. My mom has told me that Carson has broken the fighting spirit in me, and now I act like an abused puppy saying sorry 4 billion times a day. I am gaining my independence again, but I still get scared to leave my room. I am clean and this is good and I am proud of myself, but what do you have to say about this all? Because I'm scared I'd forgive him if he ever did hurt me, even though I know this man never would. And lastly, my sweet revenge. I had heard he had quit his job, so I felt safe to go into there to shop, but I go in with my new boyfriend, let's call him Sean. Carson sees me and Sean, and he starts crying. He is staring at me in a pleading way as the tears come, how he would when he'd want me to do something I didn't want to do. It's like he was begging for me to come back with his eyes. After me and Sean leave, he locks the doors 45 minutes early and we see him crying. And now I have heard his father sent him to basic training because of his behavior. I guess my current relationship feels so weird. I didn't know it was possible to have a boyfriend that doesn't yell at you. I thought that came with the territory. He's the most caring person I know, and I know he'd never hurt me, but I know if he did, it'd take a lot for me to leave. Hell, Carson left me. What can you say, Mumkey? I need your outsider's opinion. Also, with my living situation and working and stuff, I can't really catch up with you on Twitch much. Would you please upload this one to YouTube so I know for sure if you respond to me? Thank you so much for reading all this bullshit if you do. Well, as I was reading it, my golden lesson was going to be don't date an incel. I thought that'd be a pretty obvious lesson, but it seems like you met a pretty good guy who was himself an incel. So I guess we cannot be prejudiced against all involuntarily celibate men, as we shouldn't be. As we shouldn't be. That's among the most fucked up stories we've gotten so far. It's not too often we get stories from cisgender women, and this might be the most abused girl we've got so far. I think the obvious takeaway, you're asking for advice on what do I do if the new guy who is always good to me, what do I do if he hurts me? Now, I've got a few points to make about this. One, if he hasn't done anything so far, and he seems like a genuinely nice guy, and he really does from how you describe him, especially if he paid for you to take care of your heroin addiction. I mean, he's going above and beyond in ways that I'd say a lot of people probably wouldn't. You should not be afraid of him, and I don't think you are. You're clearly a little bit concerned that it might happen, but that is just the trauma talking. The abused part of your brain is doing the talking. You have no... I guess you have reason, but realistically, you should have no reason to believe that every single guy is going to end up being abusive. You've just been attracted to a sort of guy who ends up being pretty abusive. Let's say that. I would go out on the record of saying the vast majority of men are not physically abusive. And I would even go so far as to say most of them don't need to be dressed in the morning and dragged out of bed, and they're not going to spit on you. You had some bad luck, and to be fair, you were seeking out some bad compadres, I would say. But no, you have nothing to worry about with this guy. He's probably, there's a 99.99999% chance he's a normal, rational guy who just so happened to not have a girlfriend for the first 20-some years of his life. That's not as ridiculous as it might sound. But in case I am wrong, and this guy does turn the page, he does flip that coin, he ends up getting abusive with you, you should not stay in that relationship. Don't fall for it. It's a trick. As soon as he does it once, that's too many times. I've been alive for 25 years. I've been in a good number of relationships. I've never laid my hands on a woman unless she wanted me to, in a very specific context. And I imagine the vast majority of people are in the same boat. All of my friends that I know, except for one in particular, and I think we know who, but all of my friends all my life, they've never done anything like this. So if somebody does, that's the reddest flag of them all. You have to break up with them. You cannot stay in a relationship with somebody who has ever physically abused you at all, under any circumstance. It's not normal. It's not okay. And a lot of people listening to this are probably saying, yeah, no shit, monkey. But a lot of people, like this writer here, they need to hear this kind of stuff. It's not normal behavior, and it should not be accepted. You can't think, oh, it was just a one-time thing, you won't do it again. If he has the capacity of hitting you once, he has the capacity of hitting you 1,000 times. That's the way I see it. Luckily for you, I don't think this guy is going to do it. But if he does, do not put up with that shit. For every guy who's physically abusive, you're going to find 100 who are not. And I would take that to the bank. I think that's all I have to say. Ladies out there, do not use 4chan as a dating website. I mean, I know a lot of normal, cool, funny people who use 4chan, but that's just not where you want to go to find a mate. That's not where you want to go for a relationship. Try anywhere else. You'd be better off getting a boyfriend on fucking 9gag. Don't date an incel you met on 4chan, please. And I think that's all I have to say about that.